Welcome to Accounting High.
That's why we all didn't know what an EA was, because in school, they don't tell you what an EA is.
I don't think they ever mentioned it.
Ever.
That won't change. And maybe this is a bit cynical. You have your companies who actually do have EAs on staff, unless they start giving money to universities or they start showing up at job fairs.
That's it.
Yep.
Welcome back, Accounting High. Now it's time for social studies. We'll teach you new creative ways to market old product. If you watch how they post, you'll see it's all authentic and genuine. Grow up following and don't get held back by perfection. Be intentional online, create content. Now that's hot. Strategy is key with social media and pods. Start slow, pick up platforms, stick to it and go post. Make a plan to engage with client watering holes. Create a focus brand, be a lead online. It's a digital world with the best ROI. Now create your own ideal client persona. Let's go. Keyword Accounting High and get ready to blow. It's time for social studies, accounting content hub, LinkedIn marketing or X. So come join our social club. Is it Twitter? Is it X? Shit, now I can't keep up. So comment, follow, love if you into social studies.
Introducing the star of our show.
The Accounting High debate teams.
We're gonna have a problem here.
So this is our first ever inaugural Accounting High debate. And I wanted to just open up with what we're doing and why. Today, we got two teams and a debate moderator. And I'm just here as the custodian, just to kind of clean up and just do the intros. I'm the MC for today too, not just custodian, I'm the MC. So why we're doing this? We got a lot of topics in the accounting industry that we talk about on this podcast, that we talk about on Twitter, that we talk about on LinkedIn, that are heavily debated, that are discussed. So this being a high school and all, why not have some debate teams and actually have some kind of structured conversation around these topics? Now, today's topic is going to be the EA and the CPA. We actually have 3 EAs and 3 CPAs. One of them serves the dual purpose of both. We're going to have everybody introduce themselves. So we have 2 on each side, and we have a moderator who is both a CPA and an EA. And we're going to talk about the designations in the profession, why you have the designation, your thoughts on it, and we'll just spark the conversation from there. And this is a friendly debate, no throwing mud or fire or anything. We're all friends here.
So throwing hands around
here. No throwing, no, don't throw in anything. No pulling each other's hair out either. Right, my hair's longer now too, and I'm not trying to get in the middle of any fights. I'm not trying to break any fights up here. That's, the custodian always comes in and breaks the fights up in the lunchroom and everything. So I'm not trying to do that. But yeah, so we're gonna have everybody introduce themselves. We'll start with our moderator. He'll introduce himself. We'll pass the baton around, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, my name is Jeremy Wells. I am both an enrolled agent as of early 2018 and a certified public accountant, CPA, as of March 2022. And I want to first of all, thank Scott for inviting me to be part of this fun little project. And I'm definitely looking forward to hearing what our panelists have to say about this topic.
Dope.
Awesome. My name is LuSundra Everett. I am an EA since 2017. I'm excited to be here and fight with you guys. It's going to be great.
All right. We'll have our next EA go up.
So
Adam.
I am Adam Markowitz, and I'm not allowed to say CPAs suck. I'm not allowed to say that, right? I'm not allowed to.
Not yet.
Not
yet.
Okay. So I am an enrolled agent since 2017 as well. Principal of Luminary Tax Advisors here in Central Florida.
All right. We'll go with Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Streig. I've been a CPA since 1997, so probably most of y'all weren't even in school yet. So I've been doing it for quite a while.
Dope. Terrell.
I'm Terrell. I will say for this debate, I am a proud CPA since 2014. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. I'm putting my money on Brian and I up front.
CPAs. All right. So, Jeremy, you want to go with the structure and how we're going to play this out, and then you run with it? I'm going to try to keep my mouth
sounds
shut.
good. All right. So the objective here is to give both sides as equal time as possible to cover the ground. and explain why they think their credential is the way to go and why they prefer that credential over the other. Now, expecting a good, clean fight here. So keep your points relevant, stay on topic. No ad hominem, no personal attacks, nothing like that. Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. So we're going to go about 5 minutes for each individual. And so want the first speaker to introduce things from your perspective, and then the next speaker will make their case and counter whatever was said first, and we'll alternate back and forth. And so we're not going to do a coin flip or anything like that. We're just going to call it. EAs are going to start off. Whichever EA wants to start off, open up, take about 5 minutes, and then we'll alternate back and forth between the sides for 5 minutes. Once all four have had a chance to speak, we'll go with the first two speakers to wrap things up. And then once we've done all that, I am going to summarize things, give some points as far as I see things, and then we'll wrap that up.
And I'm here for color commentary. That's it.
Now, if there are anything that happens, any fouls, anything out of bounds, and this is going to be kind of like whose line is it anyway? You know, none of the points matter, right? And there are no rules except for what I say. So, but other than that,
there are no rules. There are only consequences.
That's right. There you go. All right. So, who from the EA team is going to get us started here?
Ladies
I'll go first.
Please.
Yeah, because I'm like, my trip to becoming an EA was way less like eventful and all of that stuff. So I did start out as a tax preparer in a chain tax office, and really I became an EA so I didn't have to take the annual filing season participant test every year. Like that is really it. The owner of the company that I worked for, he kept talking about taking this test next year. I'm like, dude, I don't want to do that. He's like, well, then you need to become an enrolled agent. I was like, okay. But what got me, I still had no clue what an enrolled agent was, like none at all. But he said to me that he would pay for it, but I would have to work for him for 5 years. I'm like, dude, I'm not working for anybody for 5 years. But if you're trying to take 5 years of my life, there's got to be something to this. So that's when I went and did the homework, found out what an EA was. And a couple of months later, I got started. That was in, the end of tax year, 2016. And then, it's been all gas, no brakes since. So I didn't have any grand, ideas about saving the tax world or anything. I just didn't want to take a test.
So
that's it.
Yeah, and so was CPA ever brought up in all of that discussion? So you bring up the AFSP. That's another. I don't know if I'd call it a license. It's another credential out there, right? But obviously you were pointed toward enrolled agent. Did CPA ever come up in that conversation?
Never came up in that conversation. Never. Yeah, not at all.
When did you become aware of CPA then, or did you? At any point in all of that? Did it ever come up, whether before you got the EA or after?
No, never did. I mean, I know what a CPA is. My dad has a degree in accounting, right? My dad's an accountant. He was in corporate accounting. So so I knew what a CPA was, but that just originally wasn't my path. But even during all of this, no, never came up.
Interesting.
So to practice for you, you just saw EA as the route. EA is the way to go.
Yeah. And
didn't think you needed a CPA.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah.
So what was the justification given for saying, why did your boss at the time actually say, I want you to become an EA? What was he willing to put out? I mean, besides trying to lock you in for 5 years, right? Like what did he need you to be able to do as an EA that you couldn't without it?
And see, that's the thing. He never said what it was. So even when I became an EA, I still didn't know what I had, right? So here I am. I had this whole credential. It wasn't until maybe 2 years in that I figured, I was like, oh, I can do way more than this with this than just prepare taxes. I'm sure he knew that, but didn't tell me that. I just didn't fall for the okie doke with paying for stuff. I'm like, dude, that ain't who I am. I know how to make money. Like, that's not going to be a barrier.
So unpack that a little bit then.
And-
What once you found out what the EA actually does, what is the EA? What does the license allow you to do?
So-
and how did you start taking advantage of that once you realized it?
So the enrolled agent credential is a license from the Treasury Department to prepare taxes to represent the taxpayer with the IRS. And so when you are, having tax problems with the IRS, you can provide a power of attorney for us. Then we can go and deal with the IRS on your behalf. They talk to us and not you, the taxpayer. But like I said, nobody said all that. In the beginning, it was just go get this license. I'm sure he had plans for that, but because his wife was a CPA. So I knew, so he had to know something, but whatever. Once I figured it out, I was like, okay, this is lit, so there you go. And I could, and there's so many areas of tax. And I think that's the other thing that gets left out is that the area of tax is so broad that you can either be a generalist or you can be a specialist and still be successful.
A lot to unpack there too. And Jeremy just bounced, so I'm going to take over. He got booted off for a second. So we'll go from there. We'll pivot.
With all my fabulousness, I understand.
You're good. He'll be back. So we'll shift over to Brian. We'll ping pong it from EA to CPA. Brian, I want you to talk about, since you're the senior in the room here, you've been the longest. Talk about your journey from nothing to CPA.
Mine was the old school traditional. I went to college, landed in accounting, and ended up going on a 5-year program to be eligible to get the CPA license when you graduate. And I mean, I never heard about an EA. I didn't even know that existed for years later. So I just went straight through, took the CPA exam, went into Big Four, or I'll date myself and say Big Six at the time, just as the last set of dominoes fell into the Big Four. But that was back in 97. And I mean, it was just kind of taught from school from the beginning. You're going to be a CPA, you're going to go to work for a Big Four. Maybe a few years later, you'll go into industry. I mean, that was the trajectory that they kind of just told us that's what you did as an accountant. There wasn't really anything about tax or going off on your own and being a small business owner. It was you're going to do this and this is your path. And we're like, okay, sure, that's what we'll do. And that's kind of what I did for the first 5 years. And then the 2002, it got really, the economy started falling apart, a bunch of layoffs, and that's when I went to a smaller firm. And I worked for an EA. And that's actually when I learned kind of what that credential was. And so I don't have anything, I can't say anything bad about an EA. I mean, after working for her, I've got the utmost respect. But I do think a CPA license is valuable and opens a lot of doors.
Unpack that one. What doors and what value does a CPA license bring?
One of the first things is it's just more well known in the community. And so I think that in and of itself sets it apart. But it's not that it's better, it's just it's got more recognition. And that recognition has some kind of tangible value to the general public when they see that credential.
There's a lot of value in recognition, and that's usually it right there. It's a very good point.
I will tell you, when I first heard of EA, my first thought was executive assistant. And, I mean, I could see how somebody that's not in our space doesn't know how to translate that. And so that's a stumbling block, I think, at some point.
So I think that's a very good pivot to.
So Lysandra, unpacked what the EA license actually allowed her to do that she couldn't do without it. So let's do that with the CPA license, right? What does the CPA license actually allow an accountant or really anybody to do that nobody else without that license can do?
For me, I think one of the biggest things is on the audit side, doing attestations and those types of engagements, which I don't do, but I mean, I could if I wanted to study up and actually get myself ready to do that. But also, at least in Texas, to be an owner of a CPA firm and a firm that calls themselves an accounting firm, you have to be licensed as a CPA. And I think, Adam will probably be able to address some of those issues with his father and his business. But we've had people, either EAs or attorneys, that technically couldn't become a partner because they didn't have the CPA license, and it's a CPA firm.
And now that's a really interesting point, because as Lysandra said, the EA is a license from the Department of Treasury, right? The U.S. Department of Treasury. So that is a federal license. It's a license that is not at any state level. Whereas a CPA, even though we have AICPA, we have the NASBA, NASBA, right? That's overseeing all of this on a national level. That license comes from the state that you're actually licensed in, and so each state has its own sort of way of approaching that, right? Some they vary a little bit in terms of the eligibility requirements, in terms of what you can actually then go and do with that license, what you can call yourself, right? And I think that's interesting. So within Texas, right, you've got some additional restrictions on that, or additional capabilities that license allows you to do. That is really interesting, and that's going to vary state by state. And so I'll talk with bookkeepers or EAs about what they can name their firm and what they can advertise themselves as doing. And my answer to them is always, well, go talk to your state board of accountancy. And they'll say, well, I'm not a CPA. And I say, I know, go talk to your state board of accountancy.
Yeah. No, I know Texas will go after you if you try to cross over that line. I've had clients that are bookkeepers that have called themselves accountants, and the state has come after them. And just, made them change their website and their business cards and all that just to take that out.
Wow. That's interesting.
So what I'm hearing is you got to become a CPA to call yourself an accountant in Texas?
That is correct.
And an EA can't call themselves an accountant in Texas?
Not you. There's a weird thing. You can have a position called an accountant, but you can't call yourself an accountant, if that makes sense. So you could hire someone as a, accounts receivable accountant or something, but you couldn't be just an accountant in Texas without that license.
So for the sake of this debate, do you agree with that? This being your state and your designation, do you agree with that?
Not as strictly as they want to enforce it. I could see them opening it up to other credentialed, individuals. So in EA, I think that would be fair to say they can call themselves an accountant. But,
but somebody with just a PTIN.
Not if there's, the whole thing is that they're trying to maintain some level of integrity, some level of basic knowledge that you've attained. So I could see them coming up with some other type of exam or credential that says, okay, this person's got it. So they can call themselves that.
Interesting. All right. Well, on that, let's flip back over to the enrolled agent side and let Adam have a few minutes here.
So what I'm hearing here is the state of Texas sucks. That's what I'm hearing. But anyway,
there we go. Slinging mud.
Well, that is what
yellow card on the EA team there. Easy.
He's in Colorado right now.
Yeah. Look behind me. Do you think this is going to be up in Texas?
Right. I'm pretty sure this is why I was brought here, to cause trouble. But anyway, so
exactly why.
I took an interesting path to my EA, and what it really boiled down to was I can't sit for the CPA. I don't have the education behind it. I have degrees in music and history. I never took a course in accounting, business, finance my entire life. Took one class in economics back in college. It was a 4-credit D. It's not anything I'm overly proud of. And the fact of the matter is, the only reason I became licensed when I became licensed was my father's threat of, you're going to do this one day when I'm not around. Do you want to do it based on this tax code, or do you want to take the test based on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? And I went, okay, that's a fair point, because that was obviously the brand new thing at that point, was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that went into play in 2017, and I didn't want to have to test based on that tax code. So that's kind of how I, the why and the when I got there. And I used to tell people that my license was less than. I used to admit that it was less than a CPA. But as I've gone on in life, my answer to anybody who says to me, well, what's the difference between your license and a CPA's license? And I say there are lots of differences, but for what you're going to need of me and what I would do for you anyway, the difference is I'm licensed federally My dad is licensed. My dad is CPA, is licensed by the state of Florida. So who would you rather, be represented by? Somebody who is ultimately licensed by the Treasury Department, the Internal Revenue Service, or somebody from the state of Florida? And usually when I say that, that gets people's eyebrows raised. Brian mentioned brand recognition with CPAs, and that's something the NAEA does an atrocious job of. The NAEA should do a significantly better job of promoting that we are a tax designation. Not all CPAs do tax. All enrolled agents do tax. So, for someone to just be like, I need my tax return done, I need a CPA, well, it's BS. You could be looking for a CPA. A CPA could do what you want to do, but I don't know what the numbers are, but I would guess that less than half of the CPAs out there actually deal with practical personal and business tax matters. Most of them either deal with, heavier stuff or audit stuff or corporate stuff or international stuff that average Joe taxpayer just isn't going to need or have any value in. And that's why I think that the designation I have, as accidentally as I stepped into it, pretty much for what I'm doing and for what my business is the superior, is ultimately the superior license to have.
And that's an interesting.
Talk about recognition.
Yeah, well, I was going to say,
Go
right,
ahead.
it's an interesting point because from the public's perception, right, if you're driving down the street, you're going to pass by what? CPA offices, right? You're not passing by EA offices. There are a couple here and there, but you're primarily, when you're looking for an accountant and you're driving down the street or you're looking through the yellow pages, if anybody even does that anymore, you're Googling it, right? You're going to find CPA offices. Whereas you make a really good point that inside the industry, if you actually look at it, I'm with you. I'd say probably half, if not more. If you include all of them that are in audit, that are in corporate, right, that are in banking and finance and all of these ancillary industries, right, there's a lot of CPAs out there that aren't even close to doing tax work.
So I want to speak on too. There was some media coverage of Adam within the last few months, and even on the media, the dude doesn't even know what an EA is.
He's a jackass.
I think that he's a jackass. Do you care to elaborate on what I'm referring to? Yeah, let's unpack that one there. Like that, because that's an issue for the EA designation, right?
No, I don't think what Greg Gutfeld thinks is an impact on the EA designation. I just think he decided to take a play on
the public perception of the designation.
Yeah, well, but he didn't even mention what the designation was. He just thought I was an IRS agent, which obviously couldn't be further from the truth. I fight against the IRS, not for the IRS.
The fact that we have agent in our name, that's the part
agent
of it.
part
That's
is
having
that's the
agent
issue,
in our
right?
name.
When it comes to the branding,
It is very unfortunate.
For a public perception standpoint, I think that that's something that has to be recognized too, right? Like the fact that when we think of agent, usually we think of secret agent or IRS agent, right?
And that's the NAEA's fault. The NAEA has to do a better job than what it's doing on a national level about what we do and bringing awareness to it.
Well, can I jump in there a second? Because I'm a member, but here's my thing. There's no degree in tax, right? There's no undergraduate degree in tax. There's an undergraduate degree in accounting. So accounting from that standpoint is more established. You can get a master's degree in tax, but you can get a bachelor's degree in tax.
Yeah. All right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you on the branding, but from an educational level, that is a huge difference. There is no undergraduate in accounting, so no in tax. So nobody's going to college going, oh, I'm going to and I'm going to be an enrolled agent when I graduate from college.
All right, let's let the CPAs have their chance to respond. So over to
Terrell.
All right. So, yeah, my background, I took probably a very similar background to my teammate in this debate. Went to college, graduated from college, went into Big Four, and that's just kind of what started my route of accounting. Now, after Big Four, I left that and started working for a couple of Fortune 500 companies in corporate finance roles. Now, for my perspective, when it came down to looking at designations, I'll be honest, I never heard about an EA until maybe 2-3 years ago. And even now, like as I run my own firm, we do bookkeeping and we do CFO work. I don't really touch tax returns. I understand them. I know how to interpret them, but I don't really do them. And for me, and from my perspective in my world, branding matters. Branding is probably more important than what you actually know. Like your brand is probably more valuable than your actual knowledge from the public perception, because when it comes down to getting new clients, like even though I may know a whole lot, if my brand doesn't connect well with them, they're probably not going to pick up the phone to call me. So from my perspective as a business owner, I think a CPA, as the branding game sits now, when you compare a CPA to an EA, the CPA has a much more established brand of people get very confused that there are different types of accountants, that not all accountants do tax work. But I do think the CPA designation, if I tell someone that I'm a CPA, outside of maybe a few people in the medical industry, if I say that I'm a CPA, they know what that is. But if someone says that they're an EA, one of the questions that I've heard people ask is, oh, you're an executive assistant. Like, ooh, that's a little insulting. Like, no, they're different. They're an enrolled agent. And they're like, well, what is that? And I think because the branding has not caught up for enrolled agents, I would probably say is that if a person is thinking about, should I get a CPA? Should I go the EA route? Branding is a big thing for you. And if you're looking at, hey, career opportunities, what doors will open afterwards, I would say is you're going to have to work a little bit harder if you go the EA route, because most people won't know what that is. Whereas with the CPA route, you may not have to work as hard because it does come with some public brand recognition already.
Yeah, and I would say to that, when I talk to people about it, I phrase that slightly differently. I say the general public thinks they know what a CPA is, right? They no one actually knows what an EA is, right? But they think they know what a CPA is, and so it's interesting. I think on one hand, right, we say it's unfortunate that the word agent is part of that enrolled agent, and so it makes it sound like, and in Adam's case, we're still investigating this, but it makes it sound like we're working for the IRS, right? We've got public reports out there about Adam, but, I do not work for the IRS as an EA. But, I have heard on the other hand, and not as frequently, but I have heard when a CPA will explain to a non-accountant, a non-CPA that, oh yeah, I do audit, right? Their first thing that they think of is an IRS audit. Right. And so I think in general, one of the issues that we're dealing with, whether, regardless of which license you have, is just a breakdown in communication. Right. Neither side, neither license is doing a great job of fully explaining to the general public, this is what we're licensed to do. This is what we can help you with, and those kinds of things. So and these are the terms that we use, and here's how we actually use them.
But I think it's broad, though, because again, even in as a CPA, you can focus on so many different things, right? So you can be that forensic accountant, you can do audit, you can focus on, nonprofits and, so I think just profession wise, that has expanded. So even just having a CPA doesn't really tell people what you do. They just know that you're in the accounting space in some kind of way. The thing that irks me is, usually when you're looking at all of those industries, there's accounting, there's finance, and there's no tax. And that, unless it's a tax preparer, and I'm just like, that just irks my nerves. It just gets on my nerves because it's so narrow. But usually when you're picking one of those, it's, you're under accounting.
Well, and even in the entire department curriculum, you might have a federal income tax course and a federal business tax course, and then that's usually it, right? So even when you do have tax included in your typical university curriculum, it's a very small portion of what's actually offered. And even when you get to the master's level, yeah, there are a few more courses, but it's usually a very narrow slice of what we think of as tax, right? So one of the courses I took as part of my master's program was partnerships, and we spent the entire course talking about basis issues, right? It was nothing beyond that. Never even looked at a 1065, just talked about basis issues, right? So even within, the CPA curriculum, if tax is covered, it's still in a pretty narrow way. All right, good.
Terrell, you talked about branding. What's the name of your business?
The Terrell Turner Group.
Okay. So if somebody were to just Google that, what would they find out about you?
We do accounting for law firms.
Okay. So from your branding perspective, because you mentioned branding specific as it pertains to the license, I think all of us in this profession do a miserable job with the names of our businesses, actually telling people what we do. I'm going through a rebrand right now. You mentioned me here, say Luminary Tax Advisors. Technically, it's still Howard L. Markowitz, PA, CPA for a couple more weeks. But
I prefer Magic Markowitz.
Yeah, I know you do. We had a very interesting talk about that one a couple months ago. But
a couple episodes ago.
But anyway, when I did my rebrand, I made a very good point to my marketing guy that we need to make sure we tell people what we do. So I don't think anybody is going to look at my license and go, "Are you a CPA or an EA?" when they see tax advisors in the name. There's no doubt what I do at this point. So I do think that that's less of what your license is and more of what your business actually is than anything else.
And that relates back to...
I get a point for that one, right?
Well, that relates back to Brian's point about some states having more or less intense regulations of how you can actually name your business, whether you can include accounting or not, right? So you might start a business that does accounting work, but because you're not a CPA, you can't call it an accounting firm. That right there is going to cause some potential confusion there. Yeah.
But even still,
also in my state,
most people aren't going to know what accounting really is, though. Even if you broadly just said you're an accounting firm.
So Terrell's in North Carolina. So am I. In North Carolina, still is the fact that you have to have your name in your business if you're a CPA. You can't be creative with the marketing, and you can't say, I mean, I guess I don't know all the full rules of this law, but I do know that if I was a CPA, I would have to have my name in the name of the business.
But even in your logo, even in your, in your marketing and your branding, even if you're stuck with the name, there's still got to be ways to be able to do a better job of telling the public, not just, hey, you're a CPA, but what do you do? Like, do you do tax? Do you do audit? Do you do whatever it is?
Well, and that's getting to a deeper point, I think, about our business models, right? And are we accounting firms, right? Or are how specialized do we get, and how niche do we get? And this is just the influence of the modern marketplace is that we don't have prospective clients opening the yellow pages looking for an accounting firm. We have people with specific problems that are Googling those problems, trying to find answers. And so it's our branding, our positioning, our marketing needs to not be about, or we need to find ways other than just our credentials and the named partners on the door, right, as a way of conveying to the public whether they should be trying to do business with us or not.
Yeah, I mean, because for the most part, the general public really cares not about credentials. Because if that's the case, then crappy tax preparers would not exist. The shady ones, with all the fraud and all of that. They don't care. They just want to know who does taxes, right? And so, and really that's how I built my business with my YouTube channel, right? I built a whole YouTube channel around tax. And that's where my business came from. And still does for the most part. So that, I chose YouTube because I had time and no money. So that's what I did. And the first year was rough, but it's been all gas, no brakes since.
Well, let's, in the interest of time, let's really quickly, regardless of the CPA versus the EA, I want to pose something here and let's give quick responses here. But because of some of the issues that we've talked about, the potential confusion around what these licenses are actually about and what we can use those licenses to do to help our clients, potential confusion about how we can name our businesses, whether we as practitioners in the industry are doing a good job of positioning and branding ourselves. And like LuSundra, like you said, we're not specific in our curricula about tax, right? do we need a specific educational path and licensing path that is specific just to tax, right? And then as a corollary to that, do we then need to actually require that in order to be a tax preparer, in order to be able to actually professionally prepare tax returns for others? So let's just go around the horn and get your quick thoughts on that.
I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, at some point, maybe not. I mean, a university type setting would be great, but even a vocational type school that you could go and do that without all that overhead expense so that it's open to more people. I think that would be a good way of establishing a baseline of credibility so we can get rid of more of those crappy tax preparers. I mean, we've got to do something because otherwise the IRS keeps attacking us and making it harder for us to do our job when we're trying to do the best for our clients as legally possible as we can get.
All right, Terrell.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea, but I think where we probably run into some issues is just like who will govern that curriculum. And I think because of the way that tax law changes, whoever's governing and whoever's holding the approval for that certification, will they move as quickly as the rules and the laws move? And I think just based on the way a lot of, whether it's government bureaucracy or whether it's corporate or whether it's, bureaucracy in universities, I don't think we'll ever be able to create a certification program that will move as fast as the business world and reality moves, that certification will stay relevant if it is controlled by one body. So I don't think we'll be able to get, it's a good idea, but I don't think we'll ever be able to get
that's
there.
A really interesting point. Like Adam talked about, that there was a delay. There was almost a year delay between the passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the updating of the special enrollment exam to become an EA. And like Adam, I flew in under the radar. I took it up, I think about 2 or 3 weeks before they actually updated it for Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And I was down to the wire. I was really hoping to pass all 3 parts before they could update that test. So yeah, I think you make a really good point there, Terrell, about who's actually writing that curriculum or that exam or whatever that would end up being. And then how are we making sure that stays up to date? All right, Adam, your thoughts on that?
I think it's a terrible idea. And the reason I think it's a terrible idea is because what are you going to include in there? I don't do anything with I don't know the first thing about nonprofit law. Are you going to make me pass a competency test in nonprofit law when I don't deal with it at all? I didn't, outside of an 1116, I know nothing about foreign tax, except now we've all had to learn about forms K2 and K3. Do I need a degree in proficiency in that to be able to do, a subchapter S return? I don't think so. So, and it's really for all the same reasons that Terrell echoed that I think it's a bad idea, because I think it's too broad of a topic. I think the exam will be, if it's anything else like the rest of bureaucracy, will be administered like crap. And I think that the closest thing to that we have is actually the EA exam. And that's not to say that CPAs should have to take the EA exam or anything like that, but let's call it like it is. Most CPAs can get a CPA license without basically knowing jack about tax. And that's not necessarily wrong either. It's just a matter of, it's just not what a lot of CPAs do. So just like I don't think a CPA who has a special designation for audit should necessarily need to be able to know anything about tax. I just think that's why it's a bad idea, just because I don't trust the people who would administer it to be able to make it in such a way that it's actually effective for the people that we're really trying to govern here.
All right. And Lysandra.
So I am going to be Team Brian over here, and I totally agree with having it like at a vocational type level, to where there is some sort of, even like the basic tax class, right? That's a foundational stuff. And, getting familiar with the 1065, the 1120, because the truth is the EA exam doesn't teach you how to do any of this stuff, right? So having some basic proficiency with actually having prepared a test exam or something before you get out there in the world preparing professionally, I think there does need to be something. And I mean, Adam said, we have the EA exam right now, but I think it could be actually governed in a vocational level, whether it's, even with bookkeeping, right? I mean, I know we're not talking about bookkeeping, but just because you go take the QuickBooks stuff doesn't make you a bookkeeper. Yeah, like for real. So yeah, so I think it's something that we could probably handle like in a VOTech type thing and be more effective than what, the wild, wild west we got going on now. Let's go get you some software and a P10 and boom, in business.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, so I just want to kind of, first of all, thank the four of you. It's been fantastic. I've learned a lot, right? And, I think a big part of why Scott asked me to be part of this is because I hold both credentials. So like I said, in early 2018, I became an EA and then was immediately interested in the idea of becoming a CPA. I just saw that as sort of almost a natural, not necessarily progression, but just a part of the process. And
but that's an important
I'm
point
sorry.
too. You were an EA already,
and it's interesting
you saw the
because
need to-
over the next 2 years after I got the EA license, I was told by three different CPAs, a couple that mentored me and one that I actually worked for, that they both told me they were both CPAs. All three of them were CPAs who had been EAs before they became CPAs, and they all three told me, you don't need to become a CPA. You're already an EA. If you're only going to do tax, that's all you need, right? You just need that license to represent your clients. CPA is not going to add anything to that. And I looked at all three of them and I said, but you, after being an EA, became a CPA. How are you telling me, right? Like, if it were one, I could understand it, but three different ones, giving me this advice. And, I think about, the next generation that's going to come up, and we're dealing with staffing shortages, we're dealing with confusion now, really. I mean, with what we've heard over the last couple of years about how we might be restructuring the CPA exam to where we make it to where the test takers can now choose a focus, right? Focus area that they want to focus on instead. And on top of all that, as the tax law just gets more and more complex and IRS becomes less and less functional, and it becomes more and more difficult to do all of, not necessarily the preparation work, but the representation work, it's just going to be a harder and harder sell to convince people to come into the accounting profession. We're already seeing this in just the numbers of recent grads that want to actually follow through and become CPAs. But then once they're a CPA, do they actually want to go into tax? And so it's going to be a really interesting next little bit here, I think, to see where we as a profession go.
Well, that's why this is Accounting High, aimed at that next generation. Hopefully they hear this and they can make that informed decision too.
So do you think that professors in universities, especially undergrad, should be opening accounting students up to an EA instead of just assuming you're going to do the CPA route and the Big Four route? And I mean, because at least where I went to school and the way it was kind of presented to us, that was the route. Like there weren't, you weren't allowed to deviate from it, that this is what you do. Maybe I know some people who probably would have said, oh, an EA route, I can get out a year earlier, less student debt, and get on with my life a lot faster.
And nobody talks about that too. Like, that's why we all didn't know what an EA was, because in school, they don't tell you what an EA is.
I don't think they ever mentioned it.
Ever.
And that's the NAEA's fault.
I think that won't. I think that won't change unless you have, and maybe this is a bit cynical, you have your companies who actually do have EAs on staff, unless they start giving money to universities or they start showing up at job fairs.
That's it.
Yep.
Because I think that because the CPA firms, the Big Four, show up at job fairs, well, we know who to tell you what you need to become. You need to get in like their pipeline to get with them. But if your companies that hire EAs don't show up at your job fairs, they don't donate any money, it's just like, why should we use our time to promote your potential pipeline when you don't show up for us?
Well, and the rankings, they look at CPA exam, the passage rate, how many people go into Big Four. I mean, that plays a part into the college ranking. So they are jaded into making you think that is the way to go.
Well, and Adam mentioned the NAEA, right? The National Association of Enrolled Agents. And when we compare that to AICPA, right? The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and these two are the equivalent, organizations for those two licenses. AICPA is massive, right? Relatively, relative to the field, and they've got the power of the big four firms behind them. And a lot of what they're advocating for is on behalf of those big four firms. They do some good stuff for smaller firms, but really, it's the big firms that are pushing their agenda. And you compare that to the lobbying power of the NAEA, right? It's just not there. And then you throw in the fact that you also have another organization, which was the first professional organization in accounting that I belong to, which was the National Association of Tax Professionals, NATP, right? So to me, it's not even necessarily been that NAEA is not as effective as it could be. It's not, but I think within, if we look at CPAs, if you're a CPA, you join AICPA, right? If you're a tax professional, well, you've got choices, right? I could become an EA and then join NAEA. I could become a CPA and join AICPA. I could do either of those or none of those and join NATP. And so we don't really have a unified professional organization. I think NATP wants to be that. Maybe NAEA wants to be, right? But we just have a fractured sort of way of advocating on behalf of tax professionals because of the way we have multiple licenses that cover tax, and we also have a lot of unlicensed tax practitioners.
Good point. Did you ever unpack why you still did get the CPA, and do you not regret that? I'm not going to say do you regret that, but do you think you really did need it?
It's a good question, and I think I get the best of both worlds, right? So to me, the EA was a lower, quicker barrier to entry, right? It got it to where I could start doing that work on behalf of my clients, and in a much lower cost, much quicker way. Not necessarily easier, it's not, right? But it is a quicker way to get there. And then almost a way to just, test the hypothesis, right? Do I want to be an accountant? Do I want to be a tax professional? Do I want to be an accounting firm owner? Do I want to do this stuff? And then, right, do I want to make the investment into becoming a CPA? Not necessarily because CPA is going to let me do things that I couldn't do as an EA, because, to be honest, there's about a 0.00, lots of zeros, 1% chance I'll ever do an audit, right? But to be honest, after the first couple of years, I just got sick and tired of explaining to everyone that I ran into what an EA is, right? And again, not that, I think people think they know what a CPA is, and I would be willing to wager that the majority of the time they're actually wrong, but you don't have to explain to people what a CPA is after you tell them you're a CPA.
So I'm an EA. I'm just going to reveal that here too. And I was so sick and tired of explaining to people, and they still called me a CPA. My CPA. My CPA does this. It referred to me as that. I just gave up on explaining to people. I know Adam said that in his episode too. I was going to be on track to get a CPA. I got arrested. I have a felony. I was able to get my EA. CPA would have been a much larger climb, a larger hill to climb to get that. But also at the end of the day, it didn't matter. Once they started working with us, it didn't matter. But what I did do was I was hiring more CPAs, because if they referred to me as their CPA, it didn't matter. They have CPAs working. And that was something that's just an interesting mindset that I had, where if I hired somebody that was a CPA, then I didn't have to explain the branding. I've got CPAs working for me. These are the people that are going to be handling your stuff. It doesn't matter what I am. These are the people that are going to be working with you. And it's just my management team that are EAs. So there's 3 of us at our firm that's EAs, and it's just my management team, and we don't really do any tax either way. That was just so they knew what was going on. That was my way of saying, you guys got to know everything that is going on here to get your EA. And everybody else that works for me is CPAs. So I don't know where I stand on this debate, but as a custodian, I'm just raising my hand and giving my 2 cents. I'm still an EA, but I honestly didn't renew my NAEA membership because I didn't know what it did for me. I'm probably not even going to renew my EA when it comes down the 3 years to renew it, because I'm not doing any taxes anymore. So, and I know of a lot of CPAs that aren't practicing anymore. I know of a lot of people that have their personal branding out there that don't really practice, but they are active CPAs or EAs.
Yeah, but that makes a difference you've already got your business, so you don't need it anymore. But a new person into the field, one of the two designations can open more doors than no designation at all.
Depends on the audience, right? So if it is somebody that's coming into the field or that needs to learn, it's just like my management team. I wanted them to get their EA because they didn't have to go back and go to school or do anything, but I did want them to, that was the baseline knowledge that I wanted them to have. That was the exam that I knew that they could take to at least, commit that they're in this for the long term and they know what's going on. But yeah, I mean, it does depend on the person and the audience. It's an interesting part of this where once you do get the designation and you do have a business, do you need it afterwards too? Like, does it provide any value to you now, Jeremy? Do you still keep your EA license?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? Like, I will just because I'm a Florida CPA. Florida can't ever say that I have to stop being an EA, and I'm a Florida CPA. Secretary of the Treasury can never say I can't be a CPA anymore, right? And so it's just there's a little bit of extra, assurance there that no matter what happens, I'll be okay. Now if I really screw up, then obviously both of those licenses are on the line. But I had clients when I was just an EA before I became a CPA. I had clients tell me they were going to turn me into the state board because they were mad at me about a tax return or something, and I was just like, go ahead, fine, because I don't answer to the state board, and that was actually a good feeling. And as long as I'm an EA, that still remains true. But yeah, so I think both. I'm gonna step in here as the moderator and call it a draw. and I know, right? I'm sorry, but I think both sides have great arguments. I think both sides, in terms of the industries as a whole and the licenses as a whole, still have a lot of ground to cover. And a lot of issues to hash out. But I also am very happy with having both of those licenses. I'm proud to say I'm an EA, and I'm equally proud to say I'm a CPA.
So I gotta, pull the rug out under here too. I got something I'm gonna read from a Brene Brown book. I don't know. Do you need to pick up the phone first? Yeah. So I've got this little quote that I wanted to bring in here as part of all of our debates at Accounting High. I'm going to just read this off. It's on paradoxes. So, builders of greatness are comfortable with paradox. They don't oppress themselves with what we call the tyranny of the or, which pushes people to believe that things must be either A or B, but not both. Instead, they liberate themselves with the genius of the and. Undisciplined thinkers force debates into stark tyranny of the or choices. Disciplined thinkers expand the conversation to create genius of the and solutions. So
that's great, but the EA designation is still better,
EA
right?
And CPA. We're going to say EA and CPA, not or. So go with the Jeremy. So Jeremy, right? You got 3 people that already told you, don't even do and. Don't even do both. And you still didn't listen to any of them. Do you follow the rules? Do you listen to people? Do you actually just do your own thing anyway?
A little bit of both, but more often than not, I do my own thing.
Do your own thing. All right. So for anybody out there, you're going to do your own thing anyway. But whatever it is, we all know that we've seen what the paths are, where it leads you. I think both of them are going to lead you to obviously, if you're not doing taxes, don't look at the EA. But if you're looking at having tax be part of your profession, then that's a very valid way to go. I don't think you could regret your decision going either way. I think both of them are effort. You do have to pass 3 parts of an exam for EA. You got 4 parts in a CPA. I used to always tell people that, the EA, they basically took the tax part of the CPA exam and expanded it into 3 parts. And that's what we're doing. So there is 3 other parts of an exam that you're learning. So you're getting a little bit more of a rounded approach with the CPA, and you're learning a little bit more outside of just tax and what we got ethics on the EA too, EPA, EA, whatever it is. Now adding a 3rd letter. So there is also the power of letters too, right? And I've always said this, that the CPA does have one more letter than the EA. So if we're going to go with technicalities, Adam, I think that the only way the CPA could win is that they have one more letter than we do.
Have fun signing the comfort letters as a CPA that we can't sign as EAs.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's a throw the mud. That's a good point.
No thanks.
A zinger.
They're
But
about to
aren't you?
kick me out.
We're gonna close this off at that. So have fun signing your comfort
There you
letters,
go.
all you CPAs that we don't have to do. I hope you're charging enough for those. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
I really
This was
appreciate
great.
all.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
it.
It was a
Thank
really
you.
fun
you.
conversation.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks for taking the time for being this part of this debate. We hope to have many more of these. So submit your suggestions for the next debate. Peace out.
Good deal, guys.